Today's episode is an important one. If you work in agriculture, whether you're a producer or you happen to work with producers, stress isn't just about weather and prices. A lot of it never gets talked about and it shows up in some quiet ways. That's why I'm really glad to have Dr. Eric Arzubi on the podcast today. Welcome to the Crop Insurance Podcast. I'm Mike Rydell, a third-generation crop insurance agent here to make federal crop insurance less confusing and more useful. Whether you're a seasoned grower or just getting started, we're here to help you stay covered and confident in every season. Today's episode is brought to you by the Crop West Insurance Group, your agent-friendly crop insurance group. If you want more support, smarter marketing, and better tools to help grow your agency, Crop West's expert team has your back. Visit cropwestinsurance.com to level up today. Crop West Insurance is an equal opportunity provider and employer. Thank you so much, Dr. Arzubi. Dr. Arzubi is a psychiatrist with Frontier Psychiatry, and he works closely with rural communities. He's also involved in a program called Beyond the Weather, which is focused specifically on mental health support for rural agricultural producers. And this episode is it's more of a conversation. We're not trying to turn you, the listener, or anybody into a therapist. It's more about awareness and understanding what producers in agriculture are dealing with, and making sure that people on the front lines, like whether that be a crop insurance agent, an FSA employee, that those people have better tools or language when someone needs help. So Dr. Arzubi, I really appreciate you being here. And, to get us started, just tell us a little bit about your background and what pulled you into working with rural ag communities.
Sure. Yeah, it's a little bit of a convoluted story, so if it gets boring, you can stop me. But I was actually born and raised in Vermont. So I was born in a rural state, and in between kind of my childhood and kind of ending up here in Montana, I've been in Montana since 2013. But when I went off to college to Washington, D.C., lived there for a while. I lived in Argentina for a couple of years. My family's originally from Argentina. And then I ended up working in finance in New York City, actually on Wall Street. And then at some point, I was 30 years old and, I was doing well sort of professionally, but I was very unhappy and really wanted to find something different to do with my life, something that I felt was giving me more meaning. And the person I kept looking up to was my pediatrician in Vermont. I went back and spoke to him a lot, and eventually left everything on Wall Street behind and went back to school, did pre-med, med school, and eventually fell in love with the idea of becoming a psychiatrist. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is right around when I was turning 30, I actually had probably what many people would call a breakdown, just really was miserable, anxious, depressed. I had to delay my schooling probably for about 6 to 9 months just to kind of recover from that. It was pretty horrible. So I think that experience was informative. The other thing is to make some extra money while I was applying to medical schools. I was doing a lot of tutoring. I was tutoring kids in high school and middle school in math and science. And I really loved spending the time with the kids and seeing what I was able to do to boost their confidence. I enjoyed kind of interacting with the families, and something about those two major sort of ingredients in that time of my life led me to become a child psychiatrist. I enjoyed working with the kids and families. And I sort of always looked up to my pediatrician growing up. And so that kind of, I think, what drew me into becoming a child psychiatrist. And, ending up in Montana was sort of pretty random. When I was finishing my training in 2013, I got this email from this place called Billings Clinic. They were looking for a child psychiatrist, and At the time, my daughters were, I think they were 6 years old. And my wife and I had thought, man, it'd be kind of cool to have let our girls grow up in a place that's maybe not kind of as intense as the Northeast and as congested and so forth. And I loved growing up in Vermont. I'm like, all right, let's see what it'll be like for my girls in Montana. And so here we are. I've been here since 2013.
When you came out and you started to, realize that the rural communities and places like Montana are quite different, what kind of directed you or, I guess motivates you to work with these people in rural agricultural communities?
So I'll start off with kind of, what kind of keeps me here in Montana, and it's related to your question, and that is, at first I came to Montana. I'm like, oh, this would be a nice place to live, and my girls grow up, and so on, right? But what I didn't realize when I got here was how different it was to be a psychiatrist here in Montana than in where I was being trained in Connecticut. Okay. And like you were kind of alluding to, there's so many differences. But being a psychiatrist in particular, you don't have a big toolbox, right? So there aren't like tons of psychiatrists here. There's no psychiatry training program. There are lots of kind of different levels of care that are in kind of more populated areas that you just don't have access to here. So I was, I had, and I grew up in Vermont, but Vermont is tiny. I mean, I don't know how many Vermonts you can fit into Montana, but it's tiny. And so here the distances are huge for all sorts of things, but importantly for medical care, right? So if somebody's struggling with a mental health crisis, I was so surprised when I got here and people were driving 4 hours to come see me for a 30-minute appointment. I mean, it was bizarre to me. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way, because what was happening is, I was practicing mostly child psychiatry. And so moms or dads would have to take the day off from work, get in a car, and trucks use up a lot of gas. So it'd spend a lot of money on gas coming down to Billings, see me for a 30-minute visit, and, would have to take the kid out of school. So that's a lot of hoops to jump through for a 30-minute appointment. And so it became pretty obvious to me that, things can be easier. It's just, you need, we got to get creative. And so I guess I fell in love with that challenge of how can we still deliver the, world-class care no matter where people live, and without having people needing to drive hours and spend, lots of money on gas and take time off from work and pull kids out of school. So I think, I fell in love with that challenge. And then as I got to get a better understanding of the people and the culture, I think that also was really eye-opening to me as well. Like, again, like you're saying, people in the agricultural community, the challenges, the financial, the cultural, the weather challenges that growers face, but then also other kind of parts of Montana that are really interesting and that give Montana the richness of the culture. Montana has I think is number 5 when it comes to the number of military veterans per capita. So lots of military veterans, and you got a flag. You have a son who's in at the Air Force Academy, so I'm sure you know that well. And then Montana also has a pretty high number of Native American folks. I think it's also like top 5 nationally when it comes to Native American folks per capita. So a lot of things about delivering mental health care in Montana that's very different than any other place. And I had to learn very quickly what those things were and then how to start addressing those challenges.
Why do you think that with these rural communities and places like, Montana, that these producers, why do you think they carry on so silently and they don't ask for help?
They're gosh, think about I don't know, talking about mental health, and when I talk about mental health, sometimes I'll, there's also actually we in mental health probably make it way more complicated than it needs to be. Like, so let me start there. I'm a psychiatrist, and so I'm at fault for a lot of this, right? Like, Like, think about how difficult we make it to, number one, get access to care. But the other thing is, like, where do you go? Well, you can go to an LCSW or an LCPC or an LAC, or you go to PhD or a PsyD, or you can go to an MD. Like, what the hell is that, right? So that's kind of complicated. And then, and that's after you kind of worked up the courage to go talk to someone and say, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling good in my head. Like, and then you're supposed to go figure out where to go. And then you have to go this alphabet soup of professionals to get help. Right. So I think we mental health professionals own a lot of the problem. Okay. So I'm going to start there. So it's not, so people out there going, well, gosh, maybe it's my fault that it's so hard. No, it's our fault. Like we don't do a great job of making this very user friendly. Okay. And so I want to take that off everybody's shoulders. But in the end, really, it's like anything. It's like the lingo or speaking a language of a particular topic, right? So, it starts like anything. It starts at home, right? I mean, so are you raised in a place where people are easily talking about feelings or not? Right. So that right in the place where you're born and your family and your friends and so forth. So if that language is not being spoken, how are you going to know that language inherently? Like, you got to learn the language of feelings, right, to be able to even access them. It's one of the things I talk about with parents a lot is, parent. I also think, like, we don't make parenting very easy. Like, parenting is like one of the hardest things you can do, and, like, everybody's kind of winging it, which isn't, it's not great. But anyway, one of the best things that we can do as parents is really teach our kids the language of feelings. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about purely the vocabulary. I'm not, you don't have to be all touchy feely or soft or weak. I'm like, forget that first. I'm just saying, learn to speak the language of feelings. I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm curious. I'm sad. Like, I'm happy. Whatever. But use those words, because the more we can use those words, the better we'll be able to process and understand what we're experiencing. And also, those feelings are less likely to turn into bigger problems, actions or behaviors we don't want, right? And this is true for us adults and true for kids, right? So if a kid does not express him or herself, they don't have the language, they get frustrated, they may act out. But imagine if we start teaching them the language early on, we might be able to avoid a lot of sort of quote unquote behaviors, because they just don't know how to talk about what they're feeling inside. So we adults, the same thing, right? So if we don't have the vocabulary to express what's going on inside, it's going to come out in ways we don't like. So why not just learn that language, if that makes sense? I mean, it's like anything, right? I mean, it's, I don't know the language of crop growers and farmers and ranchers. So if somebody starts talking about that stuff, I'm not going to know what's going on, right? It's going to be frustrating, right? And I'm going to be confused. So same thing with this. Like, it's just language. It's just language.
What are some, I don't know, warning signs or things that as just a non-mental health professional, what are some of the warning signs or things that we can listen for to maybe cue in on, to maybe ask them if they're doing okay, or be able to extend some resources?
So, but if it's all right with you, Mike, before I answer that question, I'd love to ask you a question. Like, when you like you just mentioned, and we were talking a little bit earlier about this, I guess I'm curious, what phone calls do you, like, when you remember some of those phone calls where people are expressing these things to you, and I mean this wholeheartedly with curiosity, what is it you've heard that have kind of impressed you, going, man, somebody's struggling, like, right? Because there's something you must have heard, right? And I'm curious how it comes out in those conversations. And I really mean that. Like, I'm genuinely curious about how does that come out in those conversations? Because it's interesting, when you and I first met, and I'm asking you, like, so who is this for? And you're telling me, it's for folks who sell crop insurance. I'm like, why? Like, where would that, why? How is that connected? So you're kind of teaching me. I'd love to hear from you, like, what's come out in these conversations?
I think a lot of crop insurance agents or people that work with farmers will relate is, I come from a family business. I'm multi-generational. The clients I'm working with, they're multi-generational. They're third or fourth generation on the farm. And a lot of the times I've my clients, their grandfather worked with my grandfather. And so
Right.
we've had relationships for multiple generations. I'm not saying all of us are best friends, but we
Right.
have an intimate relationship with our clients. And I think that's what a lot of people in the agricultural space have. And so I've had lots of conversations over the years with my producers, and they've had good times and bad times, and we're able to work through it. And you can you understand how people communicate. But then recently, I've had a couple of situations where normally eternal optimistic people, which I think most farmers are, depending on who you're asked, so they're eternal optimists or eternal pessimists, but
Right.
I just like to say they're cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
But somebody who's normally like, we'll be okay. At least we have this policy here or this in place. Now we're starting to hear things like, I don't know if we're going to make it to next year. I
Got
think
it.
that I'm going to be the generation that loses the farm. We have to think about selling off this portion of our operation in order to stay afloat. And things come up in terms of like that legacy where they feel like they've said things like, I'm letting down my father, my grandfather, because I wasn't able to make it work. And again, there's a whole host of ways that conversation can go, but those are new things that I'm hearing that I've never heard before. And when I talk to other crop insurance agents and people in the industry, they're saying similar things. They're hearing things that they've never heard their farmers say because they have such good relationships with the people they work with. It's surprising to hear that kind of despair or that we normally don't hear before. And so that's where this kind of is all stemming from, as it seems to be getting worse than it has in the past.
Got it. Well, so thank you for that. That's super helpful to understand. And I would almost suggest you gave me a much better answer than I'd be able to give you. I mean, I'm just listening to what you were saying. I'm like, there's your answer, right? I mean, because it's interesting, Brett, because it sounds like the conversations you're having, they're not like kind of these one-off sales calls and then you never talk to these people again. These are folks you develop long-term relationships with that you've gotten to know. And like you were suggesting, like, this group of people tend to be kind of, cautiously optimistic. These folks maybe not so optimistic, a little more, but you kind of know them, right? So what you're describing to me is exactly what I would say to folks to kind of look out for is there's a change, right? There's a change in how they're relating to you or how they're talking about things. And it doesn't necessarily mean something awful is going to happen, but it's something that you're tuned into, right? So you're naturally tuning into something and you're wondering about it. You're going, something's going on. So you're already there, right? And like a lot of your colleagues are already there. So now the next step is, what do you do with that, right? And I think and it sounds like you've already done a lot of the right things, and that is you're listening, right? So I think number one is just being a safe place for someone to kind of talk about these things, and not necessarily right away giving solutions or saying, oh, but you're going to be okay, don't worry about it. Like they're right. Especially I think, we men probably have more of this tendency than not, and that is to want to jump in and fix it, right? If somebody says, I'm miserable, I'm struggling, but you're going to be fine, don't worry about it. Like sometimes the person talking feels like that's shutting down the conversation. So what I would encourage folks to do is to avoid that instinct to jump in and try to fix it, and just listen and wonder about it, and to listen without judgment and with curiosity. And so somebody says, hey, look, I'm really struggling. I feel like I'm going to be the one who's going to really lose this. It's been in my family for so many generations, and I'm going to be the jerk that loses everything. And just kind of sitting there with it. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of uncomfortable silence, and that's okay, right? Because we all want to rush in and fill the silence and fill that void. Sometimes leaving a little bit of room for that silence is okay. And asking more and saying something like, you sound upset. Can you say more? Right. And just kind of reflecting back to what they're hearing rather than jumping into fix, like saying, you sound upset. Tell me more. What else is going on? Is anything else like, are other things stressing you out as well? How are you, are you, you can ask with curiosity, like, how's your family handling it? How are you dealing with it? You sound pretty stressed. What are you doing to take care of yourself? And then, if you, what's nice is you and your colleagues have some really powerful relationships to be able to leverage to really be a safe place. So using that, honoring that and giving it some space. And you can ask questions even without having to give solutions. Say, are you sleeping okay? Are you eating okay? And wherever the conversations go, just be there and listen, validate. And then at some point, there might be a natural place where, is there anything I can do to be helpful? What can I do to be supportive? And trying to kind of keep it open-ended rather than jumping in with yes or no questions or doing anything to shut the conversation down. You want to let that conversation breathe. If you feel comfortable, that'll go a long way. That'll go a long way.
I'm very guilty of that. When that situation comes up, I immediately try to jump in and
that's okay.
Fix something that I have no idea how to, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just awkward. I don't want to sit there in that awkward silence.
Mm-hmm.
I think the open-ended questioning and just kind of, I guess, empathy
yes,
can go a long ways. And that's like you had referenced earlier, like having the skills and the verbiage. It's just no different than being able to do a pull-up, right? You can't just do one. You have to work on it. Empathy is a muscle.
Yep.
We're sitting in that silence. And I guess I feel like a lot of these conversations, that'll be the extent of it. And like you said, you're there to listen. It helps them just to kind of vent, and you're able to be a safe space, not trying to fix anything, but just helping them get through it. But when it gets to a point where maybe there's some concern where you're worried about the well-being of the person on the other end, what does a person do in that situation where they're not crossing a line? What are some tips in terms of if somebody's concerned with the person on the other end of the line?
Sure. So, I kind of think back and say, okay, well, what level of concern, like what level of concern do you have, right? I mean, low, medium, high concern, right? So, and concern about what, right? Are you concerned somebody's going to go hurt themselves or kill themselves? Like, is there any, is it that extreme, or is it, you're just more worried, like, man, they just don't sound good and sounds like they're struggling, and you just, as one human to another, just don't like to see somebody else feel bad, right? So again, I want to mention, just because there's the fact that we're having this conversation, I think, is very powerful because, right, as we've kind of suggested, there's some kind of amount of discomfort about talking about kind of mental health problems, psychiatric disorders, mental illness, substance use disorders, right? Like all these things, there's some discomfort, and that's okay. That's totally okay. So us kind of exercising our own muscles here, I think, is super useful. And asking someone, a couple things, like if the idea or the concern around suicide comes up, and again, I think it's important to kind of lay it out there and talk about it. And if that idea comes up, just asking someone or the idea of suicide or talking about it does not cause people to kill themselves. There's some kind of myth, or there's this kind of level of discomfort going, man, if I bring up the conversation or the word about suicide comes up, like that means immediately somebody's gonna have that idea. And no, there's no research to support that, and I've never seen it happen. And my job is to talk about suicide when I have to, right? So that's not a thing. So again, I'm not saying everybody has to jump to that conversation, but I want to start there and say, if it comes up, that's okay, and talking about it doesn't cause it. So, lean into the conversation and just know that the fact if somebody brings that up, the fact that they brought that up is actually a big win because you feel safe to them, and they're trusting you with that information. I'd much rather somebody bring it up than think about it and not bring it up, right? But anyway, so that's, again, I kind of jumped to kind of one extreme, a potentially extreme scenario, but again, it's a thing, it's real, and it's out there. But there are resources out there, and a lot of technology out there, which makes accessing things a lot easier now, thankfully. So there's some kind of like warm lines, crisis lines. The problem with calling crisis lines is people think you have to wait till like you're like in this massive crisis to be reach out, which don't do that. Like, don't wait till like you're in this massive crisis. Even if somebody's out there kind of wondering, should I reach out? The answer is probably yes then, right? Even if they're wondering, then yes. That's the perfect time to reach out. And then even if that question comes up, because worst case scenario, if you're not sure and you reach out to someone, they're like, actually, you're fine. Okay, great, you're fine. But at least you checked, right? So for example, there's something called the crisis text line, which I think is a really cool thing. It's where anyone can text 741-741, and you text, hello, help, I'm stressed, and a human, so it's not an AI bot, a human will text you back, and it's a trained human, and it's called the crisis text line. But again, I don't love saying crisis because don't wait till you're in a crisis. Like, even if you're like lonely, like, text them, say, I'm lonely, 741-741, and you get a human on the other end. And those folks and those humans are trained to kind of go back and forth and do a lot of what we've been talking about here, is kind of listen, validate, be curious, and when it's time in the conversation, if necessary and appropriate, give resources. Same thing with the number, I think it's a couple of years now, the number 988, right? Instead of dialing 911, 988, same thing. You're not sure if you should call. So if somebody's sitting there, a man, woman, child, whatever, sitting there going, gosh, I wonder if I should call 988. I'm feeling so hot. Then the answer is yes, call. Like, just call. Like, they're not gonna be like, why'd you call? Like, I can't believe you call, you jerk. I can't, like, that's not gonna happen. Right? That's just not gonna happen. So if you're even wondering about it, call. They'll say, hey, thanks for calling, and anything else I can do for you? No, great. Or if they want to give you resources, they'll give you resources. But I would hope that people's their barrier, or the barrier to reaching out to either the crisis text line. Again, I hate using the crisis text line because don't wait till you're in crisis. So I don't know, call it the comfort text line. Let's call it the comfort text line, 741-741. And actually, I think, I'm just pulling up my phone, but if I remember correctly, when you look at the dial pad, 741 is actually over here on the left. So 741 is straight up on the left, 741 and then 741. So that's why they picked that number. So 741-741, and you text and be like, what's up? I'm lonely. And you start a conversation. And same thing with 988. You're kind of, I'm not sure, should I? Then the answer is, yeah, you should call 988. And I would kind of, just to keep things simple, Mike, I would say those are the two places to start. Like, there are other resources out there, but I'd like, maybe, if we have another conversation in the future, we can talk about more resources and so forth. But I think this is just kind of a very simple, easy, low barrier way to get started. And there's no wrong time to make that phone call.
I'm sure I'm not alone on this, because like you said, when I hear crisis hotline or to text or to call, you think it's got to be a crisis. And so I definitely learned something there. I think that alone in and of itself is a huge resource for people out there to reach out, because they're humans on the other end. I know in this day and age with all the different AI technologies out there, yeah, they might be great at some things, but at the end of the day, talking to another human could be hugely helpful. And those are fantastic resources. And how you explain them, I think, is really going to resonate with a lot of people.
Good.
If you're thinking about it, reach out. It's like
Yep.
you said, what's the worst that can happen if you reach out and you're like, well, I guess I don't need it. Well, good.
Yeah.
Then at least you tried.
Yeah. Nobody's going to yell at you. You're not going to get to be like, what are you doing? Like, no, if that's not going to happen, if it does happen, that's a whole episode we can do. But that's just not going to happen. No, and I'm glad that it resonated. And the thing, and I'll go back to, I still struggle with anxiety, and I still take medication for it. And I have some good months, some bad months, and I think, the only reason I'm kind of bringing this up is, people out there who are kind of thinking about it, you're not alone. I mean, I'm a shrink, and I, have lots of resources, and I still struggle. So guess what? Turns out I'm human, and I'm part of the human race. Oh well. I mean, so if you're struggling, you're part of the human race. Welcome to the human race, and that's why people like me are out there with this training, and also this is why we're having this conversation, to make it easier and easier and easier to be able to talk about this. And that's why I mention it. Like, again, this is my thing, but I'm trying to, I guess what I'm trying to do is model talking about it without shame. I'm not ashamed. I'm like, if I'm ashamed, that means I'm ashamed of being a human being, and I'm just a human being. Like, what am I going to do? Right. And so are we all. And so that's okay. It's okay. So if you're out there struggling, you're listening to this, you're by far not alone. I mean, and we can get into statistics too, like 50% of the entire population will at some point have a diagnosable mental health problem. It doesn't mean everybody needs to go to hospital. It doesn't mean everybody's going to die. It means 50% of the population at some point is struggling enough so that they could have been diagnosed with something. It might be mild anxiety, it might be mild depression, but it was something, right? And at any one point, 20%. So today, if 100 people, 20% of those people, so 20 of those people are struggling with a mental health problem right now. So it's everywhere. It just is, and it just means we're human and we're vulnerable, and it's okay. And it's also like, gosh, there's so many challenges and things that we all kind of bounce back from, and these are things people can bounce back from as well. And it's having a mental health, diagnosable mental health problem, a diagnosis, the only thing it means is that there's a name that's been given to kind of what you're struggling with, and there's a way to take care of it. Awesome. And then move on. So, and I know it's easier for me to say because I live with this, but I understand there's stigma around it, and it's scary for people to say. But I guess I try as much as possible to kind of do it myself, so people see, like, okay, it's doable, and it's not, maybe it still feels scary to people, but it's okay.
Well, we've been speaking pretty in terms of broadly, in terms of mental health. Like you mentioned, that was a incredible statistic. About 50% of people during the course of their life are going to have a diagnosable mental illness situation. That should help people to realize they're definitely not alone.
Right.
And that's part of the very broad conversation. But I know that your office or your group is a part of the Beyond the Weather program that the Northern Ag Network and Northern Montana Broadcasting, that they helped come up with and are partnered with you guys. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's more specific towards Montana, correct?
Sure. Yep. Yeah. So I'm a psychiatrist. I started Frontier Psychiatry with another psychiatrist friend of mine. We started in 2020, and I was at Billings Clinic for about almost 7 years. So from 2013 to late 2019, and then I started Frontier Psychiatry. And the whole idea was to do all telehealth, only telehealth. And again, that's a whole nother conversation where people are like, well, is telehealth the same? No, it's not the same. But guess what? If you have nothing or telehealth, I highly recommend telehealth. Because not everybody's going to be able to find a psychiatrist down the block, right? So I saw that as an opportunity to try to, again, make great care accessible to anyone, no matter where they live. I don't see any reason someone in small town Montana should have worse care than a person living, down the street from a medical school in Denver, Colorado. Like, why? Makes no sense to me, right? So, what's nice is we can use technology to try to make access to great care available. So, Frontier Psychiatry, we are all telehealth. We have psychiatrists, we have nurse practitioners, and we have physician assistants. Um, uh, and therapists. As I'm sitting here naming all this, here I am making it more complicated again. So let me take a step back. Frontier Psychiatry, we deliver basically the whole range of mental health care that's needed, right? If in general, if people have mild to moderate symptoms of mental illness or substance use disorders, a lot of times therapy is all you need. Like, not everybody who has a mental health diagnosis needs medication. A lot of people like to say, well, you're a psychiatrist, you're going to push pills. Like, no, that's stupid. I don't do that. In fact, I try to avoid medications if someone can get away with just doing therapy. And if folks who struggle with moderate to severe mental health problems or substance use disorders can often benefit from medication. So Beyond the Weather and the program you're referring to is a program that allows people who are part of the agricultural community, either directly involved and actually do the farming and growing, or family members can reach out to us and get care, get a certain number of sessions with us for free. The Arthur M. Blank Foundation, Family Foundation, donated some money to allow us to be able to do this for free, and we've collaborated with some of the partners you mentioned. So essentially, somebody goes to our website, frontier.care. So again, it's frontier.care, or calls our phone number, 406-200-8471. And they mention that they're part of the agricultural community and they're looking for mental health care. We'll make it happen for free. And there'll be, I can't remember, I think it's like 5 or 6 sessions that are available for free. And that includes counseling, therapy, as well as if somebody needs to get medication prescribed, we'll make that happen. But again, not everybody needs medication, so I don't want people to think like, oh, I call somebody with mental health problems, they're going to throw all these meds at me. Now, if you're talking to someone who's serious about doing high quality mental health care, that's not the situation.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome that you guys are doing that now with technology, being able to reach, just like me, I'm able to reach the growers I work with on my phone from anywhere. And
Yep.
Now that they have, not only do they have the, like you said, you hate to use crisis, but they have the crisis text line, the 741-741.
Yep.
They have 988 where they can call. If, again, it doesn't have to be a crisis.
Exactly.
And these are national organizations that anybody can reach out to. And then those are still available in central Montana or Montana
Yep.
as well. But now they're able to go to frontier.care or call your office. Again, we'll put all these links and all these numbers in the description. But now these Montana agricultural producers and family members can have a resource to go to and kind of start the conversation. And I just think
Yep.
that's just a fantastic thing. And it's just awesome for Montana with this program. And then all these other resources, just people being aware of them is just great for humans out there. Because like you
Yeah.
said, we're all part of the human race.
Yep. Well, no, I'm glad you good. I'm glad this was helpful. And again, I think, and like I was saying at the very beginning, it's on us, we psychiatrists and other mental health professionals, to make this as easy as possible, because we've done a great job making it complicated, and we need to unwind that a little bit, and that's on us.
Is there anything else you want to add, or anything we left out that you can think of? Or
No, I think I think there might be room to mention also, it's sometimes men have a harder time than women seeking care. It just kind of cultural, right? Especially if you're kind of supposed to be kind of the man of the house and supposed to be strong, and there's so I guess I just also want to recognize that every one of us, right, man, woman, child, have our own kind of issues with our own, how we feel about potentially having a mental health problem or mental health symptoms. And it's okay. We're all different, and we all kind of react differently to different challenges in life, and it's okay. And so the other thing I'll kind of say up front too is whatever you're feeling, it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. Because guess what? Every single one of us at some point are going to be not okay. And so it's just going to happen. Like I've yet to meet someone who's okay all the time. I've never seen that happen. I've never seen that happen. And so, if you're out there, call me, because I'd love to write an article about you, because that's just, it's not a thing as far as I know. So I think the sooner we can kind of look in the mirror, give ourselves some grace, and give ourselves the grace we would want others to give us, I think that's a starting point. And just know, it's, like I said, it's okay to not be okay.
Very well said. And can't thank you enough for hopping on here and discussing this with us. So thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
No, it's my pleasure. And thanks for inviting me. Thanks, Mike.
From my family to yours, thank you for tuning in. If you found this helpful, please subscribe and share with a neighbor. Visit www.cropinsurancepodcast.com for more episodes, articles, and tools. For full policy details, always check the crop insurance provisions or speak with your local crop insurance agent. This institution is an equal opportunity provider and employer.